Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Lefevers, and I work for the Miami University Alumni Association. This year looks a little bit different than our annual Tip of the Mitt event, but we are happy that you are all still able to join us virtually. Cincinnatians have long made the Northern Michigan a summer vacation destination. Just an 8-hour drive to escape the humidity of Southwest Ohio have made resort towns like Charlevoix, Traverse City, Petoskey, and Harbor Springs very popular with Ohioans. The annual Tip of the Mitt summer gathering has been occurring annually for over 50 years. Every summer, Miami alumni would gather for a potluck dinner. The event grew until the event became too big for anyone's home, so the Walloon Lake County Country Club became the annual event location. We're so proud that there is a vineyard in Charlevoix owned by Miamian Kim Culp, class of 77, and her husband, Tom Janicki. Spent several years preparing the vineyard site and planted the first grapevines in 2007. After working with several prominent winemakers in the area, ground was broken in 2015 for the custom-designed building that would become the commercially licensed winery where Charlevoix Moon is now produced. The winery is located at the vineyard site within easy reach of the state-grown grapes that make Charlevoix Moon artisan wine so special. So tonight, we are so excited that Jack Keegan, instructor emeritus who taught the ever-popular viticulture and enology class for 25 years at Miami, is here to talk about and taste some of the delicious Michigan wines that he has chosen from Charlevoix Moon. Just a reminder that there is a ask a question box located at the bottom of the screen. I'll be monitoring these questions throughout, so please feel free to ask Jack any questions you may have, and I will relay them to him throughout the tasting. So without further ado, take it away, Jack.
Good evening. I hope everyone is having fun sheltering at home and distancing, as we in fact all are. So it's really nice to meet like this. I wish I were up in Northern Michigan. I imagine some of you also go up in the spring. I was just thinking, I've actually only been in the area once, and that, of course, not surprisingly, was to collect morels. And of course, that area up there is also known for the wonderful mushrooming that takes place in May. And so that's wonderful. And so it was really great fun to become acquainted with these wines from Charlevoix Moon and just to see some of the things that are there. I really cannot wait, in fact, to go there myself. You can see on this first picture, in fact, where the Tip of the Mitt is. I probably don't need to tell you, but in fact, it is the area up in green at the top. And so we will talk a little bit more about the area in a bit. I thought what I normally like to do anyway is talk a little bit about what's happening in the entire wine world. And I thought there were some things that would be interesting to you. First of all, we are facing looming tariffs again. Those of you know that Airbus and Boeing have gone back and forth, and also there seems to be a problem with taxing some of the big corporations here, like Facebook and Google in France, and so the United States has been threatening to level tariffs. There are 25% tariffs that recently were being done, but luckily at this point it was not on wine, but there is a possibility of another 100% tariff on European wines, which would be really devastating for the industry here, simply because so many corporations and companies import the wines and, of course, sell them. One thing I thought, especially of everyone being in Northern Michigan, if that's where you are, there is, in fact, happened to be reading today because it was associated with wine, a major heat wave, in fact, is developing here for most of the country, especially Texas, Oklahoma. They expect it to be in the hundreds and be above 100 degrees for a very long time. And they say it's going to move north and east into Ohio and the Ohio Valley. So I think we will, in fact, be baking ourselves quite soon. So I thought I would give you a heads up about that. Maybe you might still want to drive to Northern Michigan if you're not there right now. Again, with everything going on with COVID-19, South Africa, of course, has been having a lot of new cases. And so they have now, for the second time, for those of you who were at one of my previous talks, I mentioned, in fact, how there's an alcohol ban. And so they have banned alcohol sales in South Africa completely. And this is very difficult on the wine industry. I think they're still able to ship. At one point, they had gotten rid of that too. So I think they're still able to ship. So in fact, people in the industry have been saying, buy South African wines, and some of them are very good. I thought too is really interesting, and again, as we talk about the grapes that we're growing today, one of the things that you really have to worry about with grapes are diseases. And there was a really interesting study going on about using UV light, where they basically have a bank of lights that goes in between the vines, and it does a really good job about killing mildews and other major diseases on the grapes. And they're looking, in fact, about doing it commercially. Cornell's working with them in Florida and a number of places to try to do that. So I thought that was really interesting. And do you want a job? The problem is, you may have seen this, that of course the federal government banned the J1 internships. In other words, people coming in. And in the wine industry, which of course is truly global, you have many, many, many people coming from all over the world, as in fact many Americans go to Australia, New Zealand. I've had lots of students who have done harvest internships in Australia, in New Zealand, obviously in California. Well, in many cases, these foreign students cannot come to America. And so now many, many wineries, I've talked to a number of them, who are in fact scrambling to find Americans to take the jobs. In fact, it was really nice. One of my students, who was my TA a couple of years ago, he in fact is going to be interning at Lambert Bridge, and his fiance, who is also took my class, is going to be interning at Clos du Bois this fall. And so there are, in fact, jobs to be had. So if you have, again, students who have just graduated, not sure what they want to do, I think a harvest internship sounds like a wonderful thing to do. So let's continue. I thought those are some interesting things happening you may enjoy knowing. Also, someone asked me previously about doing the order of tasting, and so I thought I would tell you that we will be doing the Riesling first, and then the Le Crescent Moon, and then the Moon Shadow Rosé, and then the Petit Pearl, and then the Marechal Foch, and then the Lunatic Red for last. And we will certainly talk about those. But I thought I would tell you the order of the wines, and of course I will have the names of the wines up for everything that is there. And so, of course, I thought, you, of course, have been meeting for the Tip of the Mitt for over 50 years. The Tip of the Mitt, though, is a relatively brand new AVA. AVA stands for American Viticultural Area. And so these are areas that are set up. Typically, in fact, it is the growers of the area. They basically put a proposal to the government. And then there's typically a 5 or 7 year period that goes on with questions and answers and all those kinds of things. And then it is designated. And so in 2016, the Tip of the Mitt AVA, in other words, to grow grapes so they can put Tip of the Mitt on their bottle, not just Michigan, was established. And so typically it should be for an AVA, 85% at least of the grapes come from that AVA, but in most cases it is 100%. And you see it's a large area, 2,760 square miles, of course, make the Tip of the Mitt. And one of the things that I did want to tell you, especially from the first picture that I showed you, in fact, maybe I'll just go back fast. You can see, of course, and many of you know, that Lake Michigan and Lake Huron are on both sides. And so what they do is they keep this area cool in the springtime. And because it's cool in the spring, in many cases, you don't have the frost problems you have in other places where the temperature rises real fast. You know how it will do in a summer, especially here in Oxford. All of a sudden, it'll be 75, 80 degrees in March or early April. And then, of course, we get a frost. And that has happened. In fact, a lot of that happened this spring. And so a lot of plums and cherries, etc., did not have any. I had a mulberry in my yard. Didn't have a single mulberry because the flowers froze. And so because it's cool in the spring, because of the lake effect, it misses a lot of those frosts. The other thing, of course, is the water stays warm. Not super warm, of course, but it stays warm in the fall. And so consequently, it gives them a longer growing season. And so this is why they are able to grow grapes successfully in this area. And of course, with climate change going on, they probably, in fact, are fairly well placed to grow wines and grow grapes and make wine for a very, very long time. So, of course, this is a wine tasting. So let's taste some wine. The first wine we're going to do is the Charlevoix Moon Riesling. And again, I've already opened it. Here is the bottle. if you want to switch over, Emily, here is the bottle. I didn't have a picture of it, so I thought I would simply show it to you. Charlevoix Moon makes 2 Rieslings. They make a drier style, which is very much, if you've ever had a German Trocken, which means, of course, dry. It's very much in that style. Great minerality, wonderful fruit. This is the one that has a little bit of residual sugar to it. And so, again, if you certainly first look at the wine, you can always tell so much. We like to call that color pale straw. Sounds a lot better than yellow or pale yellow. And so pale straw is usually what we call that color. And it really does have a very nice, light color to it. And then, of course, if you swirl this wine to get all those aromas up and out and smell in the glass, it's so fresh. I mean, to me, in some ways, it almost reminds me of what springtime should smell like. It's clean, it's fresh. It's got a really nice, bright fruit. Maybe a little bit of gooseberry. Also a little bit of white peach that's there. And, of course, this is peach season. And almost there's a nice sort of almost little minerality, little savoriness to that aroma also, which I really like and would probably make it very food friendly. And again, if you taste this wine, delicious. It has wonderful minerality to it. It has that really clean stoniness. Again, I don't get like super fruit flavors. I really get really nice savory notes, almost a little cucumber in the flavor, but really nice and clean, really beautiful flavors there, nice acidity. And again, there's a little bit of sugar. I should have asked Tom for it, but probably my guess would be only percent and a half, beautifully balanced with the amount of acid that is there. So it makes it's the perfect sit on the deck and, watch the sunset kind of wine. It really has that wonderful flavor. But at the same time, I could see doing this with like pasta primavera. You could certainly do it with seafood. Oh, it would just be great with scallops. I may have to run to Jungles. And it really just, I think, would be such a wonderfully food-friendly wine and really, really pleasant from that standpoint. Riesling, of course, and it's pretty amazing that they can grow Riesling, because, of course, it is a vinifera variety, which means the European wine grape. And they are not tolerant to cold. Probably Riesling as tolerant as practically any of the vinifera varieties. And so it really is a testament that they can, in fact, grow Riesling in this area, and not only grow it, but grow it so successfully. And so that really makes it, a wonderful wine to have, and certainly a wonderful wine to try from there. Just really, really lovely. And so, yes. Very, very nice. It's very nice. I'm trying to think what else. Riesling, of course, is an ancient grape. We have, in fact, even written knowledge of this grape since the 1400s. And it's grown in all the best sites in Germany. Pinot Noir a little bit now too, but Riesling, of course, is certainly the grape. Also, they make great Rieslings in Alsace, just right across the border, about the only place in France that does grow Riesling. And then also, they grow it, of all places, in Australia, and of course successfully in other parts of America too, typically in the cooler climates, because in fact it is a cooler climate grape. Certainly is almost the signature grape of New York State. And so you will find a lot of it, and of course in Northern Ohio too. So great wine, really, in fact, very, very nice. Great. I thought I would tell you, in fact, maybe, of course, about this. I was interested, of course, in the word Charlevoix or Charlevoix, as it probably would be in French. And so I thought it would be fun, in fact, to show you. This, of course, is Pierre-François Javier de Charlevoix. He was, in fact, very, you don't realize until you start sort of really looking at these things he was obviously a Frenchman. He actually, though, did a lot of his religious studies in Quebec. He then ended up going back to France and, in fact, became a Jesuit. But he was also a major explorer and probably spy for the French. He came back to America, really looking for a Northwest Passage, as everyone was. They wanted, in fact, that place through America to get to the Pacific. And so this is why he came down the St. Lawrence, traveled all over, Traverse Bay, all over this area. And in fact, eventually met up with the Mississippi and went all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, it's truly amazing. And this, of course, is the early 1700s that he's doing this. And it was interesting, too. The name for the area and the county was not originally Charlevoix, or as it is now. In fact, most of them, were Indian names. But in fact, it was a legislator who knew, of course, his story. And so, in fact, came up with the name for the area. And so I thought that was sort of interesting to know, is why you have this Frenchman up there in northern Michigan for the name of it. So I thought that was interesting. This, of course, is the wines we're having is from Charlevoix Moon. And of course, this is the vineyard sign. I really have to also give them real kudos on their packaging. I mean, it's just, the moon, everything. It's just, it really works just so beautifully. And so I think that's great. I understand, in fact, that Tom is known as the man in the moon in the Charlevoix area. So I think that works out pretty well, too. So it really is. It's great to see. And so I thought that was nice. This, of course, is their sign. I have a few other things, too. This, of course, is, as you heard Emily say, this is the winery that was designed for it. Again, really nice building. I really like the large overhang. I only told Tom he needs more trees. Of course, that's me for that. So it's just, but really, so you can go and visit. So look for the green barn, and you'll know you're there. Again, there are glasses there. They sent me some pictures of the wine. In fact, it may be the next one that we're having in there. Tom was also kind enough to send me pictures of some of the things that are going on. This is probably for a week ago. As you can see, fruit set has happened. Veraison, of course, is still a number of weeks away. That's when the grape begins to turn color. Right now, the grapes are only doing cell division. And so they're hard as little BBs and really acid, and as it would be, especially in a cool climate. And so that's, in fact, what they look like at the moment. This, of course, is what the vineyard itself looks like. Tom was getting ready to do suckering. In other words, they get rid of a lot of the lower and sort of shorten up some of the branches and get rid of some of the extra branches, especially are coming out of the bottom of the vines. And so they were getting ready to do that when he took this picture. They may, in fact, have done this week, since, in fact, we've had some nice weather for doing things like that. And again, this is sort of collecting some medals. They, in fact, are quite award-winning wines. Here's a great picture with, in fact, all the various bottles that is there, which I thought was just fantastic. And again, you can see, I mean, you want to talk about awarded? I mean, look at all of these medals for their wines. And so this is, in fact, from the 2019 vintage, or not so much the vintage, but when they did the judging of the wines. And so I thought that was really very nice and something for you to see and to realize what a great asset you have in the area in this winery. So again, let's have another wine. Wine number 2 is the Charlevoix Moon, La Crescent Moon. And, again, it's so wonderful when you have these wines. And again, I really like how they have put the moon, or the sort of the ideas of the moon and lunar ideas together, because in fact the name of the grape is La Crescent. So again, I will show you the bottle. And here you see, of course, it is La Crescent Moon. And I'll tell you a little bit about the grapes in a bit. First, let's taste the wine. This is La Crescent, in fact, is the name of the grape. And so I wanted you to understand that. This is actually, in fact, one of the hybrids. And actually, all grapes, to some extent, are hybrids. But in many cases, these, in fact, were bred grapes. And this is one of them. So again, a little darker in color. But still very, very nice and pale, as you'd expect it to be. And if you swirl and smell this wine, you can see, especially for me, what comes out. And it was interesting. I had someone else taste it today. And in fact, they caught some Riesling notes. For me, it's the muscat that comes out. It really reminds me of a really nice muscat. It's got that wonderful candied fruit aroma that is just so appealing. And so, yes, you get that wonderful fruit, that wonderful muscat nose, and there is, in fact, muscat in its parentage, as we'll talk about in a moment. And if you taste this wine, it is so nice. You notice, of course, it is a little sweet, but not too much. In fact, really not. I mean, sweetness is one of those things, and right away, and it's really foolish when people, it's like, I don't drink sweet wines. But of course, people in America especially do drink sweet wines. But the important thing with sweetness is balance. And this wine is balanced because you don't even notice after a moment, that it was sweet, because you have that wonderful acidity that is there, which balances the sweetness just beautifully. But it's not just the sweet, it's not just the acid and the sugar. What you have is the concentration of the fruit flavors of the grape itself that really sets this wine apart and really just makes it so juicy and so enjoyable. I'm completely sold on this wine. I really, I taste it, and it's just, again, it's one of those wines that you could certainly have with food, something with a little sweetness. Again, I think scallops, lobster, lots of different fish. But I think it would hold up to a number of things that you could probably even have it certainly with chicken. In fact, probably with some of the things, as long as you weren't too heavy on the seasoning with pork, would work very, very well. And all of these beautifully with vegetables, especially at this time of the season when, the tomatoes are starting to come in and the corn is in, etc. These things have wonderful flavors that would also go so well. Oh, corn. I never thought about that, but just the sweetness of the corn and the sweetness of this and the wonderful aromas, that would just be excellent to try. I actually want to try that. I really think that that's a great wine for that. So, wonderful wine, really, really tasty. As I said, and they've been a revelation. It's been really, really fun because it's like, I do obviously I go up to the annual conference for Ohio wines, and so I taste a lot of Ohio wines. I taste a lot of wine, but I don't get a much chance. Luckily, there's a lot of good cross pollination, so the people from Michigan come down to it, and of course, many of their professors do too, and for the other places, and so you do get a chance. And these are great. These are just great. Let me tell you a little bit about this grape, because I think that's part of the understanding. And I'll go back to my presentation. This is the grape itself. Gorgeous, isn't it? It's good. Sort of it looks a bit Riesling-like, but Riesling tends to have sort of dark things on it. But just beautiful color and wonderful grapes. I will say too, and I give them tremendous kudos on this too. La Crescent isn't always the easiest grape to grow. It can be have some problems with some of the fungi. It can also shell, which later on in the season in this. And so let's see what else I was going to tell you about this. And so it is in fact a hybrid. It has in fact the original parents are in fact two grapes that I did not know at all, Saint Pepin, and in fact the other one was basically just a grape that they had at the station. It was actually done by a man by the name of Elmer Swenson, who is in fact a grape breeder up there in the north. But there's some Cheval Blanc, which is one of my favorite, what we call French hybrids. And then the Muscat of Hamburg, which I really think the Muscat comes through in the flavor of that wine. And so that sort of makes it very nice from that standpoint. So again, two gorgeous white wines that really, I think, really show up very, very well in all of that. So again, nice two very, very, very nice wines. The next wine we're going to do is the Charlevoix Moon Shadow Rosé. And again, I didn't open this yet, just to show you. In fact, as I often do, I took the top off already, but I really like using a waiter's corkscrew. And so I can and very often I think the best way to do it is to take the point and put it right in the middle of your cork. And then I turn the bottle and the corkscrew so that it goes from being sort of sideways to straight up. And now I know that worm, that's what this is right in the middle of the cork. So I know that I will then be able to pull it out. I like this corkscrew also because it's double hinged. And so I get it in there fairly far. I go to the first hinge. I simply put it in. It raises very easily. I go to the second hinge, and I finish taking it out. And so it works out very, very well with that. I was looking, one thing too that I noticed when, in fact, I began to taste this wine. And again, especially if you look at this cork, do you see how it sparkles? That, of course, is tartaric acid. And being from the north, you have, in fact, a lot of tartrates in the wine. And so they do. This is that good bone, that good backbone of acidity that these wines have come, in fact, from that cool climate area. And you will often see that then on the bottom. In fact, I've been looking at this one, and I see it's also sort of shining a little bit. And so there is some tartrate on this. Okay, so try this wine. And as you can see, and this is one thing, in fact, that I noticed in the other bottle that I had, it has a little bit of spritz to it. And so there's a little bit of leftover CO2 that's evolving from this wine. But it's still, in fact, it's clear. And look at that color. I mean, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful pale. It's a pink almost to a rose color, I think, in there. But utterly clear. And so certainly it's not, there's not yeast in there. And so just beautifully done. And again, if you swirl and smell this wine, a few things you'll notice. You do get a little bit of, with the CO2, a little bit of yeastiness in the nose, which of course is very typical. There's a whole movement I mentioned in one of the previous times that you may not have been at, and this is in French, of course, it's pétillant naturel. In America, we call them pet nats. It's a lot easier. And it's because it has its own natural bubbles. And so this has a little bit of that in. And of course, when we get the lunatic, you will see, in fact, even more in that. So there is the yeast, but there's also, and it's really a very floral aroma in this wine. Oh, yeah. I mean, it really is. I mean, obviously there's some red fruits there, but it's the floral aromas, almost, again, roses. Really, really pretty. And so again, if you taste this wine, I love the pétillants that prickle in your mouth when you drink it. That little bit, again, very refreshing. And of course, I chill this wine, and I would certainly chill this wine. And again, when I say chill, 55 to 60, you don't want it too cold because you really want to enjoy all the nice, fresh flavors. And it is. It's apples, and it's red fruits, a little cranberry, just really, really nice, sort of almost a fruit compote kind of thing with the apples and the cranberries. Really, really clean, fresh, nice. Yes, lovely wine. And again, and trust me, all rosés are not like this. And part of it is because of the grape. It's a gutsy wine. It really has a lot of flavors. And this would stand up. You could do this for barbecue. I mean, you could certainly do this with a lot of full flavored things. Again, I look at pork. I look at all kinds of vegetables. But I mean, the wine has a lot of flavor. Has a lot of strength of concentration of flavor that would stand up. I mean, even especially if you're doing a mild thing with almost like a filet, you could do this. And so it really is. But I think as a picnic barbecue wine, it's, just delicious. Really, it's a wonderful aromas. Really inviting. Want you to drink more. Really very, very nice. Let me tell you a little bit about this grape. By the way, I like the moon shadow. Again, that was a Cat Stevens song, always one of my favorites. It's Marquette. And again, these come actually from the Minnesota. Again, obviously a very cold climate. And so they have been basically leading the way when it comes to breeding for cool climate grapes. There are several other people, but they certainly have been very, very important in this. It's a beautiful grape. It really reminds me of Pinot Noir in its looks, simply because it has those tight clusters. I should have asked Tom if EO has any problem, again, with rot, but this is a pretty sturdy grape, which is very good for it, and in fact, very cold tolerant in this. In fact, Marquette, it has gone down to, of all things, minus 36 degrees Fahrenheit with very little bud damage. That's amazing. I'm not sure what goes to minus 36 without sun damage in there. Certainly not me. And so, but beautiful color. And so really nice. And what's really interesting too, again, even from a layman's standpoint, I think, is the amazing breeding program that goes on. I mean, look at this. This is only part of its parentage. And so you go up again, I have no idea what Carter is. Charlevoix, of course, is a grape from, I think, northern Italy. And of course, you see, in fact, Vitis riparia is, again, one of the American grapes. And in fact, there are a number of American grapes that are parents to this, which is why it is so cold hardy. But there's also, if you see there, Pinot Noir. And then, of course, with Ravat going down, especially on the lower right-hand side of the screen there. And, of course, going to Marquette there at the bottom. And so this has been, in fact, a very successful variety. And I've had several Marquettes that I have really liked. And again, depending on the winemaking, these wines can be very different. La Crescent, by the way, the same way. You know, we're just starting when it comes to trying to figure out how to not only grow the grapes, but also how to make the wines. And so you will find that the winemakers, and depending on where they're grown, have very, very different flavors. But I've had some very nice Marquettes from Ohio also. So this is a great variety to look for, especially, you know, tasting a wine of that quality. You can certainly understand why you may be looking for that wine. So I thought it was really very nice. Emily, I should ask, do I have any questions?
Yeah, we do have a couple so far. So Richard wants to know, how long will Riesling stay fresh?
Great question. And you're in luck because of all of the grapes, probably of all the white grapes, Chenin Blanc can do it too. But Riesling is one of those grapes, and I think it's because of the acidity, and in some cases in the German, but it's not always the sweetness, but it also, the things that allow a wine to age and to age gracefully tends to be acidity. It can be sugar, and it can be tannin. Well, obviously in a white wine, you don't have tannins. And so you have to rely on the acidity and sometimes the sweetness, but acidity most importantly. And so I will tell you a good thing to know, because very often you may find Rieslings that might be 3 or 4 or 5 years old that, of course, because it is an older vintage, they will mark down. Trust me, they are probably wonderful. I'll give you a quick example. This is several years ago now, but Jungle Jim's, you may be familiar with, down in Fairfield. I found that they had these wines, which I think were, I don't remember now, 12 or 15 years old. And they were selling them for like $5.99. And so they had a few cases of them. And so what I do normally is I pick up the bottle and I took it home. And in fact, friends of mine were over that evening. And so we opened it. And again, it was a good producer, which of course also always makes a difference. And so I tasted the wine and I immediately got on the phone and I called Chunkles and said, I want it all. And so, in fact, they put the couple cases back for me because it was delicious. And so Rieslings can age. And so they go, of course, they will change as time goes on. But I will tell you, for the Performing Arts wine tasting, hopefully things will be better. Who knows, by February when we typically have it. But one of the wines that I very often have been bringing in has been a 91 Riesling. And it, in fact, is one of the first wines to disappear in the premium pour tasting. People pay extra to try those wines, and people love it. It's held up beautifully, and here it is, 29 years old. So it really is pretty amazing when it comes to Riesling. Sorry, long answer, but I like Rieslings, and aged Rieslings can be really wonderful. Anything else?
Yeah, one other one, and then we do have other questions, but we can get to them after another wine. So Sharon wants to know if you have any info on the Man in the Moon from the Charlevoix label, and if not, we can send that to Tom and Kim.
Yeah, we'll certainly have to ask Tom, because
Okay.
I don't know, and again, I said, I mean, the packaging is just great, and how everything sort of all hangs together. It's just really is very nice. So I don't. In fact, I should have maybe asked Tom, but I did not. So hopefully, Tom can get in touch with one of us, and maybe we'll find out before the end.
Yeah.
Of the
Yep,
okay?
we can do that. Richard, I noticed that you asked another question about a specific question about one of the names of the wine, and we'll send that to Tom as well, so he can answer that
That's
question.
great. Sure.
All right, that's all we have so far.
Thank you. Sure. The next wine we're going to have, we're moving on to the reds. And so the wine that we're having again is another, in fact, very new grape. This is, as you see, this is the Charlevoix Moon Petit Pearl, and I will put the bottle up so you can see it in there. And this, in fact, is another hybrid and very new, and so really fun. In fact, again, after doing a lot of research, I will be talking to Tom and find out, how he got these grapes, because these grapes have only been on the market, I only think 6 or 7 years. And so for him to have grown it obviously long enough and to be able to get a crop, because typically you don't hang fruit for a crop on grapes until they're at least 3 years old, and I would say more typically 4, before you get your first crop. And then he has something to look forward to. Typically, in fact, the grapes and the vines will often improve as they age, 7, 10 years. So it could be very, very fun to do with this. So again, you see the wine is a nice, very dark color, and I will show you some pictures of the grapes in a moment. Nice dark color. If you swirl and smell this wine, it's red. I mean, it really is. I mean, it has those wonderful, nice, mostly red fruit aromas. Pinot Noir-like. I mean, Pinot Noir Gamay, it's in that Burgundy area. You really are getting some of the same aromas that you get out of that. I would, again, red fruits, a little apple. Also a nice sort of bit of almost a truffle-y sort of forest floor. But yeah, in that Gamay Pinot Noir range, again, to give you a grape that you're probably familiar with. If you taste this wine, I see why this is a very much up-and-coming grape variety. It really has wonderful fruit. It doesn't have excessive tannins, but it does certainly have tannins there. Very nicely balanced. And I think just like Pinot Noir, right away, it's like, oh, salmon. This would be wonderful with salmon. This would also be, I mean, there's certainly lots of, pork. I think, again, a very food-friendly wine, especially with this. Oh, and now, as it remains in my mouth, I'm getting really nice cherries and really good red fruit out of that wine. Nice. And the other thing, too, that makes these wines really nice and refreshing is that good backbone of acidity. You've got it there. It's not like it's not really in the forefront, but what it makes, it's nice because it does. It cuts fat when you are drinking that, when you're having something, and even like a fatty fish like a salmon, just beautifully. And so when you're having anything like that, it's refreshing. It matches what you have. It really is a very refreshing thing to have with a meal also. And yet, I mean, this is certainly drinkable by itself because it's not excessively tannic. Obviously, there's tannins there, but it really has really nice fruit. It finishes really cleanly with really nice acidity. Yeah. Oh, it has a little bit of that, almost that cedary, almost sort of lead pencil-y aroma in it too. When you first, when you, of course, most people don't sharpen pencils much anymore, so people don't smell that as much as they used to. Let's face it, but that certainly is part of what I get. Oh, and just the fruit, it really is. And trust me, I would be very interested. I will bet you could put this as a ringer in with Gamets and Pinots, and no one would tell the difference. I don't think I would. I'd be very honest with you. Nice wine. And I will even tell you, I mean, of course, I went through, they were kind enough to send me their range of wines. And these are the ones that I picked that I really enjoyed. And I enjoyed it the first time. And wow, it's like it's a revelation. I enjoyed even more tonight than I did the first time I picked it. That's beautiful. Really nice. Really, really very, very nice. Mm-hmm. This grape, Petit Pearl, I'll go and tell you a couple things about it now. Again, dark, also tight clustered. As I said, I'd be interested to talk to Tom about that because, again, one of the problems with Pinot is that the clusters are so tight. As you can see, if it gets wet, it's a really easy place for fungi to grow. And so molds, mildews, rots, those kinds of things can be a problem with this. But this is, in fact, was bred by a man by the name of Tom Plotcher. And it was, in fact, new as far as I know in 2014. Tom probably knows more about it than I do, but I thought it was really interesting. And what's really interesting, and I can tell from the flavor, and you can probably tell, again, from the wine that you're tasting, the grape has very vinifera-like chemistry, meaning that the amount of tannins in there, the amount of acids are in there, are very much like Vitis vinifera. In other words, Pinot Noir, Gamay, etc. And so these are the kinds of grapes, these are the kind of chemistries that make good wine. And so this is why, in fact, the breeder was very, very pleased with this and says, in fact, he has a couple of other grapes in the pipeline that he's also very excited about. So this shows you what's going on in it. And again, I'm happy drinking Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but with the quality of these grapes and these wines, you would be foolish not to try these wines. I mean, because these are excellent table wines. These are wines I would be happy to serve at my table. So it really does show you, and I will again say a testament to Tom and the people at Charlevoix Moon as to the quality of these wines. I was very, very happy with them. So it's great. And so again, the Petit Pearl I think this is actually the first one I've ever had. It has a tremendous future. That's a nice wine. So it's great. So let's go to the next one. This is, again, Charlevoix Moon. This is the Marechal Foch. And this is the barrel select. I decided that I would pick a wine for the sort of hearty red wine drinkers. In other words, the Cabernet lovers, etc. And so this wine, in fact, has seen a fair amount of barrels. Again, if I'm there, here's, of course, is the label of the Marechal Foch there. In there, and of course, this is the barrel reserve. I should have put reserve instead of select. I see I made a little mistake there. So again, let's try this wine. Again, dark color, but not super. Not so opaque. I'm just trying to look. It's actually relatively opaque. You can't see through, but again, has a nice cherry edge to it. And so, again, very nice from that standpoint. And if you swirl and smell this wine, obviously there's oak. And this has seen a lot of oak. But it's not, it's not a real heavy, or it certainly is not a green oak. There are the aromas of the oak there and cedar. It's also very nicely with, in this case, dark fruits. It's blackberries, it's blueberries. It's those kinds of darker aromas coming out with that, and almost a little bit of sort of cocoa and those aromas coming out of there, and even a little tobacco. If you swirl this wine and taste it. Oh, actually, I haven't tasted it yet, but of course, I sometimes say I have wine Tourette's. I end up stopping, like, because you'll smell something else in the wine, and because it's coming out almost a little bit of almost sort of cola root beer. Very, very nice, and the oak, while there, is certainly not out of balance. If you taste this wine. Several things about this wine. What's wonderful is the acid. It's nice, and it really, again, I look at this, and when you're having good burgers or steaks or something like that on the grill, it certainly could be lamb. I mean, it cuts through the fat, and so it's extremely refreshing. And it's really great because obviously the oak is there and the smokiness is there, that almost a little bourbonish. But what you really notice then too is that good, bright, fresh fruit that's there, that nice dark sort of blackberry fruit that's also there with this wine, and so balances it all out. And it's really clean. I really like the mouthfeel too. It was almost silky in the mouth. And that's always a real, that's really, I think, a mark of a nice wine, when you have that silkiness that's in the wine and just how nicely those wines feel. And again, nice long finish. You're not getting, I'm not thinking, oh, barrel. I'm not. I'm getting really the flavors of the fruit with that. And it's all in just a wonderful combination. They really just finish very nicely together. It's a really seamless wine. Lovely. Foch. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is actually an older grape. Again, the obligatory picture of the grapes. Grapes are beautiful. I mean, so of course, you put them in, and so you find these all the time. And so Marechal Foch is one of the older varieties. It was actually done in the late 1800s, early 20th centuries in Alsace. And so is at the Colmar, the Oberlin Colmar experiment station. A gentleman by the name of Eugene Kuhlmann did the breeding work in this. It's very cold hardy. Foch has been around for a long time. Obviously, it was named for Marechal Foch, who, of course, was so prominent in the First World War. And so it's been around for a long time. It's been a real workhorse grape in Eastern North America for a long time. By the way, I'll let you know a little secret when it comes to all this. We call these grapes, for the most part, French hybrids. And as you just heard me say, most of these grapes, or most of the older varieties, not the ones obviously coming out of Minnesota, but most of the older varieties, Marechal Foch, Vidal Blanc, Seyval Blanc, Vignoles, etc. We call these French hybrids because it was the French who did all this hybridization. Again, sort of pre-climate change, they had a lot of bad winters, a lot of summers where it was rainy and cold, and so they wanted grapes that would be very resistant to rot and various diseases. And that is exactly what the American grapes have. They have a tremendous amount of resistance to a lot of disease. And so it was actually the French that did this. Interesting enough, though, in the 50s, when they really decided to go into certainly vinifera, you can still grow these grapes in France, and people do in the Loire and other places, but you cannot label them as a wine of Loire. In fact, it's only a vin de France. In fact, I'm not even sure you can label them. You can sell them, or you can make your own wine, but I don't think you can actually label these wines and sell them in France. And again, they, for the most part, don't have to, and they have all the other grapes, but they really have been very good in Eastern North America. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about that grape and what is there. So again, I think a very, very interesting wine from that standpoint. Okay. Nice. Again, it's a big wine, but it's not an overpowering wine. I really think, again, that it would go very, very well with food. And that's what you want. I find that some of the really big wines, it's like, oh, they score really well. But about the second or third sip, it's like, it's too much. It's like, I'm tired. It makes my mouth tired. And so I actually went to a tasting one day, and I actually came out of it, and I felt like I had been bludgeoned in my mouth. I mean, the wines were so big. I'm thinking, these wines will have to be 50 years before they're drinkable. And that's not what you want, because I'm not going to live that long. So certainly that is very true in all of this. Okay? So for the last wine, this is Charlevoix Moon Lunatic Red. Again, there of course is the whole sort of suggestion of the moon. I added my own thing there to the bottom since it is Lunatic Red. This wine is great. In fact, what was so great about this wine is that as we were sitting here getting ready, and of course we're sitting there, it popped its own cork. The cork just simply whipped right out of there. And that's because, of course, this is done more in this sort of pet nat style. And so the pressure got too much for the poor cork. And so it just decided to blow itself out all by itself. So again, let me show you the bottle. Here, of course, is the Lunatic Red, and it is in fact a red wine, and it is a blend. We'll talk a bit about the blend in a moment after we taste it. So again, as you said, I mean, obviously there's carbon dioxide coming off of this wine, and so when you do pour it, and by the way, they have an excellent recipe for making a sangria with this wine also. As you pour it, in fact, as you see there's bubbles there on the top, and so you do have the CO2 being evolved in this wine. And I'm trying, again, it is dark in color, and should have poured a little less for it, but it still seems to be very nice and clear. If you smell this wine, again, it's great. I mean, it's so sort of fresh and red and juicy. Oh, gee, it's Jolly Rancher sort of tasty. It's red. Luden's cough drops, the cherry ones, again, just really has that wonderful cherry aroma there. Oh, yeah, just so much fun. Yeah, well, and again, if you taste this wine, and I would put a chill on this wine, but so interesting. Again, like a Beaujolais Nouveau, very candy-like in the flavor, but very fresh. I mean, very fun, very tutti-fruity, I mean, kind of a thing. I mean, it's just, this is all that fruit there. Has a little bit, and really interesting, a little bit of that cideriness to it because, again, of the bubbles. So you do get that sort of red apple, and you get some of that cideriness there too. And really, surprisingly enough, it's not really beery. I mean, obviously it's got bubbles, but you don't really get the aromas that you typically would get of beer. I would say really cider. And just fruit. I mean, just really is. It's just, it's fun. As I said, I should have put a little bit more of a chill on it. I probably wouldn't have popped the cork too. Because it does. It's got all that fruit. And so I think, bringing the temperature down would sort of not so much accentuate the fruit, but I think maybe sort of really give you something that is just enjoyable. Yeah, what a great aroma. Fun. Yep. Very nice. This wine is a blend, and I will show you this. It is 53% Marechal Foch. It's 26% Cabernet Franc. which again is a grape that in fact is grown very successfully here in Ohio, and of course is one of the main grapes in a red Bordeaux, and also grown widely in the Loire, because it is probably one of the most cold tolerant of the red vinifera varieties, in other words, of the European wine grapes. 13% Valiant, which again, I will be honest, I did not look up completely. That's a new grape variety on me also. And of course, 8% Petit Pearl, which we've already talked about with that. But again, just a fun sort of, a little bit of almost dessert for the wines in there. And so those are our 6 wines for the evening. And I want to, of course, I'm happy to answer questions, etc. But first and foremost, I want to thank Tom and Kim of Charlevoix Moon for these wonderful wines and a really great exploration of the tip of the Mitt. And again, makes me want to visit. Maybe I can have morels and good wine. I think that sounds like a pretty good combination to me. Questions, Emily?
Yep, we do have a few.
Sure.
So Kate wants to know, will the flavor of the red wines change over time? What is the best way to store these wines?
Good question. The most important things when it comes to storage are away from the sun. And what you want more than anything else is, obviously, to an extent, the cooler the better. And so typically, again, obviously, if you're in an apartment, you don't have a whole lot you can do. But again, I would say in the bottom of a closet where it's dark, you don't have a lot of vibrations, and you don't have a lot of temperature change. What's worse, let me see if I can figure this, if I can sort of explain this to you. I would rather keep wines at, say 65 or 70 if the temperature doesn't change much, than if I had them where it's mostly at 60, but from time to time goes up to 70 or 75. It's the changes in temperature, because what happens is, obviously, wine being a liquid, it will expand as it warms and contract, and so it may lose a little bit of wine, etc. You don't have to store wine on its side. It doesn't hurt, but there's been really good studies that show it doesn't necessarily have to be on its side. So I would say away from the light, no vibrations, and try to keep, it would be nice if you had 60, 55 degrees, but we all don't. And by the way, I worry sometimes, and I guess not so worry. I know too many friends who have had the wine refrigerators, and again, the compressor will blow or something, and they don't realize, if there's not an alarm on it, that suddenly their wine has gone up to 130 degrees for a few days, and so their entire wine collection has been ruined. And I have heard of that a number of times. And so make sure if you have something like that, you have an alarm. But really, you don't have to. As long as you've got a place that's dry, doesn't have a lot of vibrations, and doesn't change a lot in temperature. Obviously, you're going to from summer to winter. That really is good. And that's why cellars, basements, those kinds of places are often the best places to store for a long time. But never forget that 90% of all wine purchased is drunk within 24 hours. So for the most part, you don't need to have to worry. And most of these things, especially 1 to 3 years, it's a long-term storage that then it becomes more of a problem. I'll even tell you, when at my old house, I literally basically kept my wine stacked in boxes on the side of my bedroom, and they did fine. They really did. And I would put the air conditioning on in the summertime, partially for me, partially for the wine, so they wouldn't get too warm. But they did fine. And for the most part, they will do fine for most of us. Okay? Questions?
Yeah. So we have a couple questions kind of on how you mentioned like the new breed of grapes and breeding grapes. So the first one from Jen is, the comment on up and coming grape really caught her attention. She assumed that all grapes were known, but this sounds like a new breed. How does this happen? Naturally, through genetic engineering, or some of each?
Actually, no. Again, my background is horticulture, and so I I try to look at the data as much as possible. And I mean, without getting into it, I am, I have no problems with like the newest techniques of CRISPR, etc. But no, all of this breeding has been, in fact, absolutely natural, the way people have been doing breeding for literally a couple of thousands of years. And so there's no genetic engineering or anything in any of these grapes. Though there are some interesting things, especially with CRISPR, which is a way of sort of deleting things, about trying to improve, especially when it comes to diseases, etc. But no, all of these grapes are absolutely from natural. So what they do is, and again, and much of this takes time. And this is why it's so important to support these kinds of breeding programs at like the University of Minnesota, because, or the apple breeding that's been going on at several universities for now 40, 50 years. And the reason being is because you make the crosses, you get the seeds, you plant the seeds. Again, you have to wait a couple of years, in many cases 2 or 3 years, to sort of evaluate the quality and the flavors of the grapes, see what diseases that they may be immune to, or at least don't get very easily. And then, of course, make wine out of these grapes several years to figure out. And then if it doesn't work out, you go back to the drawing board. And so a lot of these things, I mean, literally take years and years. But all of this is classical breeding, the kind of breeding that's been going on. We've understood a little bit better since Gregor Mendel came on the scene, again, 120 years ago. But this is all classical breeding. There has been no genetic engineering or anything in any of these grapes. And the problem is, again, as you know, and enjoying, your cool summers up in Michigan. And of course, there are those cold winters up there too. And so you need a grape that's going to be cold hardy. And especially because you have water on both sides and, of course, thunderstorms, you need something that's going to be mildew resistant. And so if they can breed grapes along those lines, that still, and of course, most importantly, make good wines. And I've never been, I don't look my nose down at any of these. In my opinion, you would be a fool not to try these wines. And again, you'd be a bigger fool not to enjoy these wines, because they're delicious. They really are great examples of what wine can be. Other questions?
Yeah, and so you may have answered this, but I just want to ask, since I'm not a wine expert. You were talking about breeding grapes for climate resilience. So Rob said he got a little lost on why it can't be grown, sold, or labeled in France.
Oh, it's because in the thing that it's actually, I mean, this is human work. In other words, they decided that the French hybrids, which in fact they developed, which is sort of amusing. By the way, they call them American hybrids in France. That they did not feel the quality was as good as I always say, a bit tongue-in-cheek, as the ones God gave the French. And so consequently, they only use the vinifera varieties. And so it is. Well, you have to realize, and there's good and bad on both of these. And so I'm certainly not making a value judgment, but you have to realize, in America, you can grow whatever grape you want to wherever. And again, you may be a complete idiot and never make money, but if that's what you want to do, that's your prerogative. In France, especially to have a wine labeled a Burgundy, if you want to label your wine Burgundy, in other words, it has to be grown in that region, and it can only be, if it's a red Burgundy, it can only be Pinot Noir. If you grow a white Burgundy, it can only be Chardonnay. You can't grow Riesling, you can't grow any other grape and call it Burgundy. And so, and these are good because it's set by law. And it's good because, of course, they have literally thousands of years of tradition. And so this is why it is so. But in other places, again, because, I mean, let's face it, we've not been growing quality grapes in America maybe 50 years. I mean, 50 years ago, let's make sure I get my math straight here, maybe 60 years ago. 60 years ago, there was there was no Chardonnay grown in California. There was 100 acres of Cabernet grown in California. But again, as I mentioned when we talked about Cabernets a few weeks ago, I mean, Cabernet is a relatively new variety. And so it really wasn't until the 1800s that they were even growing in France, because it was a natural cross until the 1700s. And so this is why. And so part of it is laws and tradition, probably more than anything else. Okay.
All righty. And one more question we have is, we have two more questions. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is your take on so many of the Trader Joe's $6 to $9 bottles of wine and their value and quality? Just because you had mentioned the jungle wine that you had found earlier.
Trader Joe's is interesting. Two things though, and I'm in a bit of a disadvantage. We don't have a Trader Joe's nearby, and so I do not. But what Trader Joe does, and by the way, to a great extent, Aldi's does the same thing, is that they go in the market, and when there is, and by the way, for example, right now in California, there's a lot of excess juice, and so they will look for things and they will find some wines that are good. And in many cases, it may be their own brand, or it may be a brand that you or anyone else will ever be familiar with, because they will do that. And in fact, some of the wines can be very, very good. The other person who did that so much, of course, as soon as I said that, now of course I have to remember his name. In fact, and you don't hear from him much, but when there's a lot of excess wine in the marketplace, as there is, because again, in California, the crop was very, very large the last couple of years. And of course, now with COVID-19, I mean, all the supply chain, everything's messed up, obviously. And so there'll be some good buys around. And that's what Trader Joe's does. I mean, they obviously have a good team and they're looking for those wines. And you'll find, for the most part, those wines come and go. In other words, they find something, they'll bottle a few thousand cases, they'll sell it all at Trader Joe's, and then you'll never see it again. Or maybe if they have some kind of thing with us. And so wine, it's very interesting, because for the most part here in America, we've had what's called the three-tier system. And of course, and you can blame it all on prohibition. When we did this great experiment trying to stop people from drinking alcohol. and so when they, instead of repealing prohibition, because some states like Mississippi wanted to remain dry, they left it up to all the states, which is why we have this incredibly crazy quilt of laws when it comes to wine in there. But typically it's a three-tier system, meaning that the winery can only sell it to a distributor. The distributor can only sell it to a retailer. The retailer can only sell it to the consumer. And in fact, there is a state mandated markup on those wines. And that's how that system is beginning to break down. It still is the main driving force in America, but it's beginning to change and break down. And so that's why you have flash sites, and that's why there's all kinds of ways to do this. And people like Costco and Trader Joe's, they play those margins. And you can find some great wines. I mean, I bought a bottle a few months ago. I bought a bottle at Aldi's for, again, I don't know, $5.99, $6.99, because I'm always willing to try something. And I went back and bought a case because it was a delicious Gewürztraminer. And for that price, it's like, of course I bought a case. And so it makes it fun to go and check around. I remember, of course, people know about Tupac Chuck. And again, it was very variable. And so what a lot of people would do, I've been told, I actually never did this, honest, where they would actually go, they would buy a bottle, they would go out to their car, they would open it, they would taste it, and then they'd go buy a case. Because again, sometimes it was really good and sometimes it wasn't so good. So, I mean, that's what you do when it comes to wine, especially when you're looking for good, quality value ratio kind of thing. Any other questions?
Yeah, so super quick one.
Pearl, by the way.
Super quick one and last one of the night is Jim wants to know where he can get that Miami branded wine opener that you have and that you always use.
You mean this one?
A couple people have actually asked
tell you, and of course I should not do this, but I'm going to anyway. I'm going to tell you a story. And I started about, time goes so fast, probably 7 years ago at least. I started for the class because, again, I think it's important to have a good wine opener. So I started for the class literally buying, again, because, the students pay a certain amount for the wines, etc. And so I began buying wine openers that I checked, through a specific person in California. Because I think this is a really sturdy, double-hinged wine opener, which I really like. And so for a number of years, I would put the name of the class, and this is an old one, Miami University on the side. In fact, the guy couldn't get the thing right to sort of this blob instead of the thing. Well, the problem ends up being is that, again, a couple of years ago, the secretary of the department, and rightly so, she wants to always keep everything on the up and up. She's like, Jack, have you gone through trademarking to put Miami University on these? And I don't sell these. And of course it was like, no. And so it was like, and so she wouldn't let me put Miami University on these unless I went through trademarking. And trademarking didn't have a vendor, and the vendor would have had to pay a lot of money. And so consequently, I don't put Miami University on my things anymore. I put the name of it, and then I put something else on the side in there. So that's why I see this. In fact, I shouldn't use this for that very reason. But yes, so that's why. So if you want to talk to Miami University about letting me use Miami University on the side of these, then that would be great.
And that is all the questions that we have for this evening.
And yes, and of course, obviously, I'm sitting here doing here, and I thank you all for attending, and I dearly love Miami University, and which is one of the reasons I'm sitting here in front of you. And I'm so glad that you attended, and I hope you enjoyed it. And one more time, I really need to thank Tom and Kim for making these wines and making this evening to a great extent possible. And so I hope that you will soon be able to all meet again for a tip of the mitt in person. Otherwise, be careful, stay safe, and love and honor. Good night.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you so much to you, Jack, for taking us through this awesome tasting. Thank you to Kim and Tom from Charlevoix Moon Wine for providing these wines that we were able to taste tonight, and for just making it so easy for people to get them. So we really appreciate that. So be sure to check out the Charlevoix Moon website, check out their winery if you're ever in town, but also check out our Miami Alumni website, www.miamialum.org, to check out the other virtual events that are being hosted by the Miami University Alumni Association. I hope that you all had a great evening tonight, and as always, love and honor.